Hello, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to The Local Lens, a podcast from the Powell County Health Department where we go inside one community's experience with the drug epidemic. So the entire point of this show is to gather as many different perspectives as we can, and then share those perspectives with everybody else so that we all are more aware of what other people are seeing. So this episode mixes two completely separate interviews that ended up crossing over ridiculously well with each other. And so we have two different perspectives, one from the local lawyer, Mr. Jarrett Rose, and one from a local pastor, Brad Epperson. So Jarrett, being in the court system, sees people on their way to jail. Like, once they're arrested and once they're working out what their sentence is going to be, what their jail experience will be. And then Brad Epperson gets involved once people are in jail. So this episode tries to tie together the before jail experience and the during jail experience. Because as you'll learn, the court system plays a big role in recovery. Anyways, let's go on and get into the episode. This is The Local Lens, a Powell County Cares project from the Powell County Health Department. I'm your host, Nate Brooks. These are our people, using our voices, telling our stories, because no one sees it like we do.
My name's Jarrett Rose. I am Assistant Commonwealth Attorney for Powell, Wolf, and Breathitt counties. I've been a practicing attorney 5 years this October. Born and raised here in Powell County. Went to Powell County High School. Did my undergrad studies at Morehead State. Majored in philosophy and history. So not a lot of choices as far as advancing that. So I ended up going to law school in Dayton, Ohio, at the University of Dayton. I lived up there for 3 years. Passed the Kentucky bar and moved back here. So when I first started, I was just in private practice. And I say I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. It was more of a learning experience. I got to do personal injury. I did some criminal defense. I did wills, estates, deeds, just general practice. And when you're moving back to a small county, you kind of have to be that. You kind of have to be a jack of all trades, master of none. So not to compare myself to the legendary Dr. Noss, but he knows what it's like to move back after going to school and having to practice in a small town, and people depend on you for a lot of things. So, but I have I've been in this capacity as Assistant Commonwealth Attorney since January of 2019. That's when I started with Miranda King. She's our Commonwealth Attorney. So we service Powell, Wolf, and Breathitt counties. We're a 3-county circuit. And we try to devote as much time as we can to each county. So we handle the felony cases. Anything that is over a year of jail time, we handle that. A lot of what we do is drug related, whether that's blatantly drug related, possession or trafficking of narcotics, or if it's just related by happenstance. And a lot of times that happens where there's a theft or a violent crime. We can usually trace it back to drug use.
What does it look like when it's bigger scale things? For it to get to your table, how big does it have to be?
Well, there's certain requirements. So with possession, what we're looking for, and most of our concern is centered on methamphetamine. We do deal some with heroin, with prescription opioids. With things like marijuana, it's usually people who are growing it, and the standard is 5 plants. If you're doing that, that's where we intervene with marijuana. Usually, if it's a misdemeanor attached to a felony and it involves marijuana, there's not much point in us doing much with it unless it's a problem. So what I've seen is methamphetamine in all 3 counties that I work with. It's ravaged us. With methamphetamine, from what I know about it, and I don't pretend to be innocent, but I definitely had never laid eyes on methamphetamine before I started this job. So I was kind of like a curious kid when the officer had it. I was like, I kind of want to see what it looks like. I'd never seen it. But with that, they don't need a prescription. It's readily available. It's easily made. or in most cases it's easily transported. And a little bit goes a long ways, not to make light of it because it's deadly, but a little dab will do you. It's very potent. We see it getting more potent with things like fentanyl and carfentanil mixed in, and we've just really started to see that recently.
So fentanyl is ridiculously deadly. It's mixed with other substances and has been the cause of 95% of overdoses in our county lately. How recent has that been, do you think?
We started noticing it last year when we took office, 2019. There was a case from a neighboring county over in Estill of an officer that came into contact with fentanyl. It actually made contact with his face. He had to be Narcan, the same as if somebody was overdosing. It was very powerful. I forget, I don't want to quote exactly, but I think it took at least 3 or 4 doses of Narcan. Wow. This is from someone who has never used drugs recreationally to all of a sudden having pure fentanyl in his face, on his skin, in his respiratory tract, and he was very lucky that he was able to be revived in the first place, and that he really didn't suffer any health consequences because of that. But
so when you're considering the opiate crisis, an interview with Jarrett Rose in his position in the court system is interesting for 2 main reasons. And the first one that we're going to dive into is that so many of the cases and so much of the crime in our community is driven by the drug ecosystem. So it seems like the legal system has been a very commonly cited first step and a catalyst towards all that.
Definitely, and it's like I said, it's a team effort. So our job is to prosecute and to make people who have committed a crime to not necessarily punish. Well, punishment's part of it, but to face the music, whether that's if they've stolen something and they need to make restitution to make it right, if they are so far behind on child support that it becomes a felony, that's a disservice to their child. So we're dealing with a variety of different cases, but I can tell you that drugs are usually at the heart of almost everything, and that's from murder to robbery to rape to most of our theft cases deal with drugs in some capacity. A lot of the assaults, violent crimes, deal with drugs in some sort of capacity. So that's definitely under the table in almost every case that we deal with.
So it's important to keep on remembering just the sheer amount of exposure that our court system has to this, because it does offer them a unique perspective. And it also offers them a chance to intervene and to point people towards recovery.
We don't want to necessarily punish people for using, and I certainly don't agree that jail fixes everything. There are some people who need to take their time and serve their time, pay a debt to society, but there are some people who just need help. And I'm thankful that we have the ability to do that here. We have the resources as best we can to get them into various forms of help.
So when people come to that crossroad between they've done some kind of crime and jail is up for question, but there is need for some kind of mental health treatment or some kind of recovery treatment, who makes that decision of whether they're going to be leaning more into treatment or doing the jail with treatment added into that?
That's a good question, because it's definitely a team effort. We work well with the public defender's office, and most defendants in this area are represented by the public defender's office. They are state workers the same as we are. I actually interned with them one summer in law school. They do a great job. We don't necessarily always agree with each other, but that's why we have courtrooms. But it's a team effort to get a plan of action and a course of treatment. We work with drug court. A lot of times we will use probation and parole, put someone on probation or diversion in lieu of jail time, and have them assessed. And I usually leave it open as to what they recommend. So they go through a thorough assessment, and whatever they recommend, we make that part of their offer. So
Mm-hmm.
the program that I'm most involved in is Rocket Docket. So,
Which is a funny name.
Rocket, yeah. Yeah, a lot of jokes. Richard Fain calls me Rocket Man.
Yeah.
But what Rocket Docket is a program for felony drug offenders if they meet certain requirements. So if the crime charged is nonviolent, obviously we're not going to offer anything in lieu of jail time if it's someone who's committed a violent crime or a crime against a child or the elderly. So if it's, say, a possession of methamphetamine, that's a felony in Kentucky, Class D felony. We are able to, based on their prior record and based on currently what they're charged with, we're able to give them an offer at a very early stage in court. And a lot of people complain that, it takes forever to get through the system, to get through the court system, and it does. So what we're able to do with Rocket Docket is when they appear for their preliminary hearing to determine if there's probable cause in their case, I'm able to come in, look at their stats, and say, hey, I want to offer them a Rocket Docket deal. Mm-hmm. They immediately take the deal after discussing it with their attorney. If they choose to take it, it's their choice. So we don't even have to have a preliminary hearing. We don't have to have the arresting officer testify. We don't have to have cross-examination in the courtroom. They take the deal. And it's not a slap on the wrist. The bare minimum that I'll do is usually 2 years. Diverted, which means if they comply with what they're supposed to do in 2 years, it will be dismissed. It'll be off the record. They'll complete their diversion. So, or probation, depending on their past. If sometimes they're not diversion eligible, sometimes they are. So we take the Rocket Docket offer. It always includes some form of treatment. Now that's where it gets tricky, is trying to work and see what puzzle piece fits best. What treatment option is best for them? Is it drug court? Is it straight up, just being assessed by probation and parole, whatever they recommend? It could be something as simple as attending AA meetings or NA meetings, or it could be as, as profound as up to a year, in in-house rehab facility, a bedded facility. And a lot of times that's what people need, is a bedded facility. They need to get out of this area. They need to get away from the people who they've been hanging out with and associating with, get somewhere new, and do their treatment. So they don't always take the offer, but it is offered to them if they're eligible. If they do take it, they are immediately placed on those conditions. They are to immediately be assessed for either drug court or some kind of substance abuse treatment. The next time we have circuit court, we read the offer onto the record. They plead to the crime, and they're sent on their way. To complete whatever it is they need to complete. I don't have the stats on what the recidivism rate, what the failure rate is. I can just say from personal experience, I've seen it work and I've seen it not work. As the old saying goes, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And a lot of times that's what it feels like to be in this job. We can certainly offer them every opportunity in the world. It's up to them.
So if you're the court system and you're looking at everything going on here, you hope you never have to get involved, because if you, as the court system, have to get involved with this, it's because crime has happened, and nobody wants crime to happen. But when it gets to the point that the court has to get involved, then the court is stepping in to intervene with this, because it's now affecting other people and not just the person that's using.
I think it snowballs with people. I think they try it, have a good feeling, and then it snowballs from there, and then the next thing they know, they're homeless. Their families kick them out. They're so out of touch with reality that they can't see the problem themselves. And that's where, unfortunately, someone else sees the problem. And we just hope it's the right people. We hope it's not someone who's going to let them OD. For better or for worse, cops are going to see the problem and most likely arrest them, and then they're introduced into the court system. That's where we see the problem, and we try to intervene. Is it sometimes the best way? No. I wish we could just peacefully approach everyone and say, gently lay our hand and say, you need to go to rehab.
Yeah.
And they would say, okay,
yeah,
show me how.
yeah.
But it doesn't work that way. A lot of times it's a high-speed chase, or it's, kicking down the door, or it's them passed out with a small child in the back seat. It's, it gets gritty and it gets ugly, but I think the end goal is the same, to get them help.
So far in this episode, what we've looked at is the road to incarceration. What is the whole process like leading up to the point where they're in jail? But now we're going to shift from looking at what happens before then to what happens once they're in jail. And to help us with that, we have Mr. Brad Epperson, who's a local pastor for us. And he also works part-time in the jails, helping run a form of a recovery program inside the jail. So he's going to give us some insight as to what these men are experiencing once they're in that jail system, and what some of the social changes, some of the behavioral changes they go through when they're in that environment. So real quick, I want to thank Jarrett Rose for being on the show. Thank you for contributing. We really appreciate it. All right, let's go on and get into this interview with Brad now. And I'm going to apologize ahead of time. We were in a room that had just a ton of echo. So please ignore all the echo that's on our voices for the rest of the show. Appreciate it, guys. Thanks.
This is my hometown. This is where I grew up, and these are my people here. And it's nice to get to live here. It's nice to be able to live at home. I know a lot of folks, if you grow up in a small community like ours, you a lot of times you end up leaving and having to stay gone for work and things like that. I'm so thankful that I've been able to move back home after some time away and to be able to live here. And that's brought me back into the community as a pastor, and also I get the privilege of working at the local detention center and the substance abuse program. And I'll do a little work on occasion at one of our local funeral homes as well. And like I said, it's just a real thrill to be able to be here in our community, where I'm from, and among people that I feel a real connection to.
So you said you're involved with some of the stuff going on at the jail, and how long have you been doing that with the jail?
I've been doing that for, I want to say, time gets away. I think 3 years.
Okay.
Might have to go back and refigure the math on that. But And what I do is I just teach a supplemental class in the substance abuse program. And the SAP program is a Department of Corrections initiative that they operate in prisons and in local jails. So we, for example, here in Powell County, we house 100 state prison inmates in our local jail who are a part of that substance abuse program. Then we have some other state prisoners doing other things, but that's been a real eye-opening experience for me. As a pastor and just as a member of the community, I had seen plenty of the heartache and the devastation that the opioid crisis has been causing here. But that's been real formative for me to be able to enter into that and to sort of see it from the other side of that, to see the other angle of the folks that, not just family members who are left picking up pieces, but those that have been caught in that addiction themselves, and some of them still very much in that and not quite in recovery yet. It's been interesting. Like I said, it's been eye-opening.
What percentage of the jail population here do you think is there for drug-related?
It's very high. It's very high. Now, it's like even in what we would call the general population part of our jail, which would largely at that point be our local county inmates. Because even, here in a place like this, and probably everywhere, there are a lot of crimes that are committed that are also related to the drug problem that we've got here. A lot of the thefts are people stealing to support their drug habit. A lot of the violence is connected with drug use. And so, it's just ubiquitous. It's everywhere here.
And that is exactly what Jarrett was saying. So it's big.
There are people who are living a life of misery. And then there are people who are profiting on others living a life of misery. Of course, I know a lot of the guys that you find in there that have been users. They have also probably done some dealing, low-level dealing to support their habit. But somewhere in back of all that, there's a machinery that's pretty evil, I think. But and this just comes from my conversations with them. It doesn't. I never look into their files or anything like that. I just try to have honest conversations and hear from them. But I think probably a lot of those guys that get involved in that, like I said, it's sort of just kind of gone along with that criminal pattern where you start doing things and then you cross another line, most of these guys didn't intend to be drug dealers. They just kind of started using, and then they fell in with, it just one thing led to another.
And that's something that I think a lot of us can relate to. And I know for myself, just being at college, I saw this happening with alcohol all around me. I was around a lot of people who were starting to just experiment with drinking, and some people really let it carry on and build, and you could see how they would turn to more and more and then eventually turn to other substances. So I think that it's at least a near universal experience of getting used to something and just wanting more and just going along because you want more of it.
Absolutely. And most of those guys, I remember asking, for example, just kind of polling in one of the classes that I was teaching, one of the things that I thought about, I wonder what their answer to this would be. And there's a lot of debate about gateway drugs. Is marijuana, for example, a gateway drug? And what was funny in that setting, almost every one of those fellas in that jail program told me they believed that not only was marijuana a gateway drug, they even talked about cigarettes, that when they started smoking, it was a gateway on and on and on, that moved them forward. I don't know what to make of that. I think that's just the way of people. We get used to one thing, and then all of a sudden we're looking for the next thing. And that's how it is. And most of those guys tell me that really, especially when they get into something that's more like the like heroin or these other opioids, you spend the rest of your life chasing that first high. You're trying to find that experience all over again, but it seems like it always eludes you. You never quite get there, and you can see how that becomes an entrapment all its own.
My goodness, I just love talking to Brad Epperson. He's so good at looking into other people's actions and pulling out motives and seeing common trends in what different people do. But anyways, let's go on and look more specifically into what is happening in this substance abuse program here. What tends to be the demeanor of these guys? That they're kind of their, well, take it however you feel.
Okay, all right. So like when I meet the guys in the jail, there are 100 of them in that program at a time here in our county. And some of them are, it's a 6-month program. And at any time, you've got people just about ready to graduate out of the program. You've got people fresh in. Some of them have, they're the last drug they took is barely out of their system at all. They're still lingering. So you get guys that are at a different place with, their usage. But also, some things begin to happen the longer they're there. And there's usually a tipping point in attitude. Some people don't get to that tipping point. Some of those guys, they either quit the program, and they're allowed to at any moment. They can quit that program and just go back to just jail.
Okay.
So they can quit, or they can end up breaching some codes of conduct there and losing their place in that program. But very often, what we seem to see, at least it's my experience, that there's a tipping point in attitude somewhere along the way where a person may go from being very resentful toward the whole setup to saying, you know what, I'm going to get all the good that I can out of this. Every now and then I'll have guys that'll tell me that you know what, I'm not really ready for sobriety. I'm not really ready to be clean, but I figured out that if I stay here for these 6 months, I'm learning things, I'm picking up tools so that when I get ready, I'll have these things that I can use. I mean, it seems a little bizarre to me, but that's what they say, and I always say to them, well, I hope you make it. I hope you, first of all, I hope you live long enough. But I also hope that moment comes where you just kind of have this click and you say, okay, I'm ready for this. And so anyway, we get a lot of different, like I said, we have some that are still very, very resentful. They've got their guard up there, but eventually I think people get tired of that and they give up on it.
Yeah. Does yours, would this be considered treatment more, or is this just kind of like a class that?
No. I mean, this is a big program. I mean, it's a big deal. This is, like I said, it's a Department of Corrections initiative, but it's been going on some time, and they consider it a therapeutic community. Okay. And these guys have to apply to be in this. I mean, they have to choose this, seek it out, and try to get into it. It's sort of somewhere between voluntary and involuntary. I mean, these guys are sort of under the gun that they're incarcerated. They're in the system. They're in jail. But stepping into this program, that's pretty stressful. I mean, the accountability there is high.
Yeah.
And not only the whole, the being held accountable, but as part of a therapeutic community, having to learn how to hold other people accountable. That's as much a part of that program, and that's the thing that these guys usually end up hating more than anything else is not only do I have to take care of me, I got to help you take care of you. And
what does that kind of look like?
Oh man, there are rules. There's a structure within that program. So these guys that come in, they get assigned different jobs and different roles. One of the jobs that some people get is to be an elder within the community, okay. And to be an elder makes you very much responsible for other people. So if you're an elder over a group of men and they are violating certain codes within this system, not only are they answerable for that, you are too. Mm-hmm. And so you're under the gun to hold other people accountable. If you're just a participant in the community and you see things happening and you don't do anything, you also can become answerable for that. And like I said, these guys, it's totally different from the whole environment that they come out of. When they've been living a life of criminal thinking and criminal activity, that is not a part of that at all. And so, I mean, it really does push them. And they tell me how stressful that is, trying to get used to doing that. And so, they don't have to be there. It's voluntary, mm-hmm. But they know that not being there, where they go from there is not a voluntary thing, but an involuntary thing. So
yeah. It seems at least that like putting people like back into that kind of shepherd role, even. Mm-hmm. It can cause, I would imagine it would cause me to look at things through a newer light. And I don't know if that's something, does that kind of happen at all?
I think so. I think for a lot of these guys that it really does. I think that, what we talk about with that's really just basic human interaction. If you're a part of a family, mm-hmm. This is the kind of stuff you do in a family. You mm-hmm. you kind of understand what everybody needs to do, and you do your thing, and you kind of expect other people to jump into that. Mm-hmm. If you're, and you work in a job, the same kind of things apply. But some of these guys, like I said, it's that they've been out of that loop mm-hmm. for so long that for them to have to get used to living within that again, it's a challenge. But I think it does. There's something about them that the more they get into a place where they can embrace that and say, okay, if this is what really being a man in this situation looks like, then I'm going to do that. And mm-hmm. and those guys, I mean, like I said, you can almost see some of those guys just maturing right in front of you mm-hmm. because of that, because of the responsibility of it. I think responsibility can be a pretty powerful motivation if somebody's willing to pick it up and run with it. And so so it works.
So that's actually just the beginning of a long thought, and we actually carry that conversation on in another episode, but that'll come in the future. Don't worry about it right now. But anyway, that's all the time that we have today. I would like to thank Brad and Jarrett Rose so much once again for being on the show with us. Both of you guys putting these two views together, the leading up to jail and then the experience once they're in jail, and kind of seeing how people change through that whole process. It's very insightful. I think it's very interesting. So thanks again, guys. And also a big thanks to WSKV for broadcasting this show and all the help that they do, and also to the health department, the Powell County Health Department, for letting there be a show. So you've been listening to The Local Lens from the Powell County Cares Project. I'm your host, Nate Brooks. Thanks for listening, guys. These are our people, using our voices, telling our stories, because no one sees it like we do.